Welcome to the Matt Report, a podcast for building businesses with WordPress. Subscribe to the Matt Report at mattreport.com/subscribe. And now your host, Matt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Matt Report. As always, your host Matt, and today, awesome guest, Rob Walling from Drip, from Startups for the Rest of Us, and a whole host of other products that he's created and sold over the years. And today we're talking about his recent selling of Drip to lead pages, and we're going to dive into that story, of course, what it's like to build a SaaS product, and really compare his traditional SaaS world to the WordPress product world, and all the experience that he has with dealing with other entrepreneurs that have WordPress products and services, and sort of just drawing the lines of comparison to what he's been through and what we might expect and desire out of our own SaaS offerings, especially those of us who are hearing a lot of advice that say the one-off sale isn't valuable anymore to the business. What's really valuable is moving to a SaaS model, monthly pricing, or at least annual pricing, and sort of securing that recurring revenue that way, instead of just relying on re-upping the licenses that we sell or the service contracts that we sell through our product. So definitely a great conversation. Really hope you do enjoy it. We are sort of winding down the summertime, and this is second to the last, I believe, for season 3 of the Matt Report. Next episode that comes out should be the season finale, or at least the wrap up to our interview series for the summertime, and then coming back strong in October. And the next episode that comes, oddly enough, right after Rob Walling, is with Nathan Barry of ConvertKit. So 2 email marketing automation SaaS companies getting their perspective on SaaS and the WordPress world. As always, mattreport.com/subscribe to join the mailing list. It's number one way to stay connected. And if you do enjoy the show, we'd love a 5-star review. Really helps us get found.
Matt Report.
Let's get on with the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure.
I'm a super fan. I'm a super fan, and when you said yes, I'm excited to get this episode underway. And I got a lot of listener questions from folks who know you fairly well, listen to your podcast. But for folks who are out there who have no idea, who have been living under the entrepreneurial rock for the last 3 years, but they don't know you, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, man. Yeah, you're too kind. I appreciate that. I'm a software entrepreneur. I am really a software developer at heart, but I haven't written production code now in a couple years, which is something I want to get back to. But I have a blog at softwarebyrob.com where I talk about my entrepreneurial endeavors. I have a couple podcasts about starting small bootstrap software companies. So one is called Startups for the Rest of Us, and one is called Zen Founder that I do with my wife, who's a psychologist, and we talk about the mental side of things. And then I co-founded an email marketing and automation tool called Drip about 3.5 years ago, and that we recently were acquired by Lead Pages. And before that, I ran HitTail, which was a different SaaS app, and then I've owned literally dozens and dozens of online businesses, ranging from e-commerce to information products to productized services before we called them that, other software products and that kind of stuff. So I've just been, I won't say dabbling because it's kind of my full-time plus job, but I've been kind of doing this for about 16 years, and I've been talking about it for about 11 online, through the blog and the podcast.
Recently did an episode with Paul Jarvis, who does a lot in the space of courses and sort of membership sites, and we had a fairly good discussion about folks can't really be doing this stuff part-time, and I guess even maybe for SaaS products nowadays, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was like, yeah, you could have a full-time job and you can sort of do this thing on the side, and it was a nice little gig, maybe made you a few $1,000s a month. But now I feel like the competition is so much greater. There's so much more noise and choice out there that you really have to be all in to even do a micro product. Do you feel the same way in that regard?
When you say microproduct, do you mean more of like an information product or a software
Yeah,
product?
I mean, I lean towards information product because I feel like a lot of people see that as low hanging fruit, and they're like, oh, I could do this, I could whip this up in a weekend, right? But because I'm in the WordPress space, I see a lot of that actually coming out now with themes and plugins where people are like, I'll just outsource everything to Odesk and slam this thing out onto WordPress.org or ThemeForest and charge $29, and it's easy peasy. But I feel like it's not. I mean, I feel like those folks eventually learn the cold, hard lesson. But do you feel like you can kind of just do this on the side nowadays, or do you really have to be all in to get it working?
So I do think that you can do it on the side, but I don't think it's, the extreme of whipping it up in the weekend or outsourcing everything to Odesk without having some chops and having done it before. I don't think is necessarily that realistic. But I do know quite a few people who are still able to launch smaller efforts, whether it is, the 50-page ebook or a short video course or a WordPress plugin in a pretty tight niche, that are doing that while they're doing a full-time job, right? So they're doing nights and weekends, but they're putting real time into it. I would absolutely agree that it is much more competitive and across the board than it was 5 years ago, and then it was 10 years ago. And if you're going to start a SaaS app, it's even more. It's even worse. Like, it's even more competitive. It's even more complex. There's even more time. So, yeah.
Right. And I feel like folks that follow me, they know I rant about the traditional internet marketer, right? The internet marketing guru, right? Especially those who are now finding themselves looking at software as a service or setting their sights on WordPress themes and plugins and going, ooh, that's a juicy opportunity for me. Ran into one the other day that they're selling a theme. And this is actually a lesson for folks who are listening, who are developers who can't get their pricing right. I mean, this guy is selling a theme for $500, right?
Jeez.
And I was reading the documentation, and the documentation states if you don't see the options in the theme, to disable a plugin called Advanced Custom Fields. We all know what Advanced Custom Fields is. And he's just telling people, yeah, just disable that plugin because we built Advanced Custom Fields into the theme. I mean, that's a technical nightmare, right? But it doesn't matter to these types of folks nowadays. They're marketing, they're selling software. They know how to do that stuff. They just don't know how to develop. And I think that's a scary, scary place, right?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely there's a bit of gold rush, may be an overused metaphor, but there is a lot of buzz around software and software as a service, and like you said, WordPress themes and plugins. These things have become really popular in our circles, your and my circles of folks who've been writing code for years, and we've slowly learned how to market ourselves better. But as those have gotten more popular, more, as you said, internet marketer folks are coming in, and I think the interesting thing is I've had conversations with a few of them because I have relationships with some folks who are maybe a little bit more on our internet marketing side, and they really think that it is I don't want to group everyone, but just the two folks I've talked to, they think that coming from info products where it's like churn is really high if you have a kind of a membership website, and one guy told me that selling he wanted to do WordPress plugins, so he did, but then since it's a one-time sale, he wanted to get a recurring, and then he expected what was it? He expected to sell as many SaaS subscriptions as he had WordPress plugins in the first 90 days. And it was just way, way out of touch with reality, right? Because that's the whole point. Like SaaS is great for the long-term revenue, but it's such a long, hard build. And I find that there's maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding from someone who maybe hasn't done WordPress plugins before or hasn't done SaaS. You're not quite in touch with reality with how much effort it actually takes to A, build a good one, B, to support it well, right, and not have crummy docs or have someone, because email support for an info product is pretty easy, right? You can answer some questions. Or email support for a SaaS app or WordPress plugin, you need someone who can get into the code a little bit. They may not need to be a developer, but they have to be pretty sharp, and they need to know how to view source and get into run some jQuery commands to do stuff. And so it is a different level. And my hope is that they will learn it, and that anyone getting into software will learn it. But if history is any guide, I'm not sure whether that's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I mean, support is definitely one that's sort of overlooked or understated by some of these folks out there. shifting gears slightly, you years back probably had the opportunity to build Drip as, let's say, a WordPress plugin, but you went SaaS, and I sort of hear you hinting at this along the way in this conversation so far, that it is not easy. So what are the stumbling blocks or the speed bumps that you've hit over these last 3 years that either now you're relieved, right? Because now you're like this sigh of relief where, okay, I don't have to worry about this anymore. What are those lessons or those sort of speed bumps you hit along the way that you can share with folks that maybe looking at getting into SaaS or turning their plugin into a SaaS model that you could offer up as advice?
Sure. Well, I mean, I find what's interesting is when I'm talking to SaaS founders, a lot of SaaS apps want to get in the annual pricing game because you get so much cash up front and it cuts down on churn. And when I talk to WordPress founders, a lot of them want to get in the monthly SaaS game. It's like we're both going the opposite direction.
Exactly.
You know, it's really funny to watch that. And I know there is appeal to having that monthly recurring revenue of a SaaS app because it's so consistent and it's long term. But there's a lot of advantage to having like an annual plan in essence, or annual support, or however you bill it, and getting so much more value up front because it allows you to fund development, to develop new plugins, and that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of the first point, is that SaaS, there's this phrase called the long, slow SaaS ramp of death, coined by Gail, I forget what her last name was, but she founded Constant Contact, and it took them years and years to get to any type of revenue. And that happens with most SaaS apps because they're just priced at a level, they're priced at 1/10 of what you might charge if it were an actual piece of software. Or maybe it's even 1/20th or 1/30th of what you would charge if it was just a big one-time purchase. And so as a result, your cash flow is much, much less. And you might find yourself developing for 6 months to build the app and launch it, and then spending the first 6 months getting to $1,000 or $2,000 in MRR. I mean, this is not an uncommon thing. So really, be aware that we do hear some Cinderella stories. There are the buffers and the bare metrics, and I would put Drip in a category of really growing well and growing quickly, but those are the exception. And so, whereas I see folks, again, it still takes work, it takes expertise, but I see folks launching WordPress plugins, marketing it well, hitting the niche right, hitting the product market fit, getting up to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month pretty quickly, just because the distribution is there, right? The WordPress.org repo and the other channels, how well that ranks in Google and all that stuff. Getting that up to a few grand a month is, if you hit it right, is actually a lot faster. It's a lot easier. Easier is relative, but I think it's a pretty good first move.
Yeah, and Lead Pages started as, I forget what plug. I think it was like a YouTube video. Like
it's called Lead Player.
Lead Player. Yep. It was Lead Player, and that started as a WordPress plugin. And of course, honestly, I haven't really been following Lead Pages up until your announcement of Drip and Lead Pages, but I mean, that to me was a Cinderella story for sure, in terms of like, look what a WordPress company can do. But I think WordPress has been so far in their rearview mirror now that they're not even really synonymous anymore. Lead Pages and WordPress, that is. But do you think that there is opportunity for? I mean, there's a lot of us in here that are like hoping to get to that next step. Do you think that, I don't know, even like investors or the market could even look at a WordPress company and say it's valuable? Or are folks like afraid of open source? Does it not look meaty enough unless you're a SaaS business, right? I don't know if that makes 100% sense, but
yeah,
like a lot of people look at plugins and like, oh, that's just like, what is that? A little throwaway project you have going on there. Oh no, but we want to be millionaires.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do. And I mean, I think whether investors or the market looks at it, I don't care. Like, I don't think it's really that important, because, you and me and folks who are probably listening to this podcast, we set out, my goal was always to make a living on my own and not have to, have a salary and not have to have I didn't enjoy client work, right? I was a consultant and I didn't particularly enjoy that. So that was really the goal. And so if the market and the investors don't want WordPress plugins, then more room for us, because you can, I mean, again, I have, multiple friends, trying to think, I don't want to say dozens because maybe it's not, but more than 10 at least, who have launched 1, 2, sometimes 3 WordPress plugins. Each of them goes to several thousand a month. Poof, they're living in the United States purely from their own, making 10 grand a month off WordPress plugins. And so, yeah, they're not going to become millionaires, but that's a heck of a gig to do. I mean, it's really, really fun. So I do think there's a lot of room. I actually talk about, I have this approach or method called the stair-step method to bootstrapping. And it's, in essence, it's starting really small, especially with as competitive as things are today. It's starting really small with like a single product that is a one-time sale. So it's something like a WordPress plugin, maybe an add-on, to Magento, or even an ebook. And getting that off the ground and just getting that launched is going to take months. It's going to be stressful. You're going to learn a ton. You're going to learn how to market and copyright, all these things we don't know how to do as developers natively, but we have to learn them. Once you get that out, maybe it's not a huge success. Maybe it makes a couple $100 a month, but you've done it. And then you do that again, and you just build on that until you have enough income that you're able to kind of quit the day job or quit consulting. And at that point, once you have time, then you can decide, all right, I own all of my own time basically, and I have freedom, of time, income, and location. Now you can set your sights on something maybe a little bigger. If you want to get into SaaS, you want to do something a little competitive, you have so much more knowledge now. You're way better at copywriting. You're way better at supporting. You probably have a virtual assistant helping you with email support. So you've learned how to delegate. You've learned how to hire. You have a lot more confidence in your skills. You just have so much more you can bring to the table. Because when you level up to something like SaaS, it's going to be more competitive. There's going to be people with more money. There's going to be people with more experience. And you want to be playing at least in the ballpark, right? You don't want to go from little league to the pros. I view it as kind of stair-stepping your way up in some maybe smaller niches and having some income and experience that helps you level up in essence.
Yeah. And one sort of add on to that, and something that, because I know I get this question, I see this a lot, I get this question a lot, is, I'm a lonely or, solo plugin developer. I've got this product and I need to get it to market, but I suck at marketing, right? I don't even know where to begin. I don't know what kind of copy to write. I don't even know how to do a good screencast. So I get these questions and I hear this a lot. And WordPress, the community anyway, is sort of ripe for these little micro launches, because you can go to a WordCamp or a WordPress meetup and get face-to-face with your potential audience or customer that I don't think you can really do unless you go to like a traditional trade show, or you beat the streets if you're in like a, I don't know, some other non-WordPress SaaS, because that starting point is, number one, very difficult. It's scary for a lot of folks. And one thing is that I can never really get a good answer for is managing the time. Like, how long do you stay in that limbo state of, I've launched, I'm testing my copywriting, I'm testing to see if people want to buy this. Like, how long do you give that cycle before you say, you know what, this product is not going to work for me, or, I've run out of, I've saved up 3 months of salary and I just got to get back to work now because I'm running out of money. Like, what time frame do you give yourself to stay true to the product? Or is there no real answer to that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things to think about. Funded companies, when they go out of business, they go out of business because they run out of money. But self-funded companies tend to go out of business because they run out of motivation, right? Because typically you can make it, even if you do go, let's say you do go full-time for a month or two to build it, you can typically take on some client work, maybe, go back to the salaried gig, as you launch, if you are running out of money. And you can do it nights and weekends. And, unless you're doing some big complicated thing, I believe that you can make that happen. The only time you're going to really, really need to stop doing it is when you run out of motivation. And so I think each of us is kind of different in that respect. But I do know that you can be, to a fault, you can be in either direction, right? I had a friend who spent 3 years fighting and never, and the product just didn't get traction. And then I have friends who do it for 2 weeks, and if it doesn't get to number one on Product Hunt and instantly become, buff the next day, then so there's an in between. For me personally, and I kind of the recommendation I've always given is, I think you should spend no more than 4 to 6 months of part-time work building it. Again, that's nights and weekends. That's the way I tend to think about it. 4 to 6 months building it, and then I actually think you threw out 3 months. That sounds like a perfectly reasonable time to give yourself to kind of really dig into a project after you launch it, because launching is like the halfway point, right? A lot of developers think that launching is the finish line.
Right.
The 20% or the 50% mark. Now the real work begins. This is the hard stuff, because we all know how to write code. We know how to build things. That's the easy part. The hard part is getting it to, like you said, copywriting, just learning how to do all that stuff. And I think, giving yourself a minimum of 90 days, if you've never done it before, and this is literally the first time, I mean, geez, you could spend 6 months and learn a ton from that, right? If you've done it before, 1 to 2 months is probably what I would have in my mind. It all depends. I mean, so when we launched Drip, which is a SaaS app in the email marketing space, I mean, we had an email list in advance. So we launched to 3,400 emails, and we got monthly recurring revenue up to about $8,000 in the first month, which is really good, right? For a small bootstraps. I mean, I was like, boom, that's like a salary for somebody. But then we what do you call it? We leveled out. We got stagnant for about 5 months because we had a product, but it wasn't different enough from, MailChimp and Aweber. And so we had 4 or 5 months of just struggling. And I knew, since I've launched and built these things before, I knew that we'd be able to push through. I just didn't know how. And we also had the money, right? I had not funding, but I had my own kind of revenue from other products that we were using. So I broke that rule, right? I went longer than 2 months of stagnant revenue, but it was also making $8,000 a month, and I knew that I'd be able to pull it out. So it's kind of like, at what point do you have confidence in yourself to do it, and at what point are you so frustrated that you want to give in? And I think there's probably some number between a couple months and maybe 6 months on the outside, especially if you're doing a smaller product. That's kind of the range I would think about.
And it's also the entrepreneurial mindset to be just crazy enough to hang on, right? Just right. Crazy enough to stick around and fight through that, because the alternative is either shift gears or get on the job. One other thing, before I forget, so in that moment where you sort of started to plateau for that 5 months, how did you break out? Was it a feature? Was it a twist on marketing? What did you do to sort of shift out of that little lull that you had for 4 to 5 months?
Yeah, we had to do a slight. It wasn't even a pivot. It was more like it was a set of features that the market wanted that differentiated us from the MailChimps and the Awebers. And so the way I found it was we were emailing all of the customers who had canceled and saying, hey, what was why did you cancel? What was the reason? And we got maybe 100 replies, and we sorted them and looked at what the most common results were. And one of them that kept coming up was people kept saying, well, for what it does, Drip is too expensive. And then we get, yeah, Drip is great. It's really easy to use, but it's a little pricier than MailChimp and Aweber, so we're going to stick with that. And we looked at it and thought, we could do one of two things here. We could just drop our price, because we started at $49 a month. We could just drop our price, like match MailChimp and Aweber, and that would answer that part of their concern. But what we really wanted to do was we wanted to aspire, like we wanted to be a $49 product. And so I flipped the question on its head and I said, what would we need to build in order for Drip to be worth $49? And so then we started talking to people, and what they wanted was the automation piece, right? It was being able to move people in and out of lists. And when we released automation, that was it. And it literally, I've had a bunch of apps and I haven't seen kind of a growth curve like that. It was very noticeable right as we launched the automation stuff.
A bunch of threads of thought that I want to get into. Number one being that price point. Being able to say, because I say the same thing with my own products, is I want to be, whatever. I want to have a one-time transaction of $100. I don't want to have to go down to get more sales. I want to say, what do I need to do to get that $100? And I mean, obviously, smart on you to do the same thing with Drip. And full disclosure, I don't even think I mentioned this to you before. I am a customer, right?
That's right.
And so here's some feedback for you. When I originally signed up, and this is totally off the beaten path here, but when I signed up, the mistake that I made was I signed up right when you announced automation, because I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to hop right on this. The problem I had was I didn't have the time at that point to dive into like setting up a complete workflow of automation. So I sat on it for, I think, 2 months, and then I canceled, and then I re-upped once I actually had my marketing automation plan. That was the big thing for me. But I know now you have the templates or the blueprints, I forget what you call them, which I'm sure satisfies, my avatar of a customer who signs up and goes, oh God, I didn't realize I had to create, 10 drip emails, or I just didn't realize how much time it was going to take.
Yep.
Which I think can be sort of a challenge for your product or anybody's automation product as well.
Yeah, anytime you give someone a to-do list when they sign up, it's really, really hard to get them through. And so we've added a ton of stuff. I mean, that's kind of getting that trial to paid, or even the first couple months churn down, just by a lot of education and trying to provide as many resources as we can. And that's a good tip for you as someone listening to this. Like, if people are canceling and they're saying, well, I just don't have the time to do it, you can say, well, that's their reason, or you can think, boy, is there any way possible, any way that I could help reduce that, whether it's through education, whether it's through offering a paid service to do exactly what they need, whether it's doing it for free because it's worth the purchase. You got to think creatively about it.
If you're pricing, and this is super common for WordPress plugin developers and theme authors, if your price is too low and you can't spend the time, like you're not making enough to spend the time to dive in with your customers and find out what's wrong. So here's an example. I sell a plugin. It's called Conductor. The average sale is $100. And I actually have, and this is my own fault, right? So this is recognizing one of my own faults is I say this is for agencies. It's not for WordPress beginners. It's for WordPress professionals. And I have people saying, hey, can you hop on and do like a demo for me? Can you show me how my agency can use this? And I've done a few, but they take, as you know, hours upon hours. If I was charging a little bit more, like a traditional sort of enterprise software sale, right? I mean, with air quotes, like if I was charging more money for my software, then I could be doing sales demonstrations all day long, right? Because I'd be recouping that money. It's that reinvestment into spending that time. So that's another thing that folks have to realize is if you need to spend a lot of hands-on time or do like white glove installs for clients or customers, think about upping your price to spend a little bit more time. Like you said, Rob, I mean, I'm not going to go downstream. I'm going to say what's going to make $50 a month worth it for these customers. And I think if you get a solid price point, you can spend a little bit more time with your customer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like to think of software sales in terms of 3 levels, like low touch, medium touch, and high touch, where low touch is just someone comes up and signs up on your website and downloads, and you really never talk to them. Whereas medium touch is, like you're saying, doing demos, maybe doing screencasts for them, something like that. And then high touch is tends to be in person, or at least at a minimum, it's really, really a long series of phone calls, and you're working with them over the course of weeks, and it's like more of an enterprise sale, basically.
Did you focus on any with Drip?
Yeah, we started low touch, and we moved once we launched automation and really started catching kind of gaining that quick customer uptake. We went to medium touch for folks who were in any plan over $49, so from $99 and up, because we have people, luckily, well, not luckily, but it's a good model when you have usage based. So the more kind of subscribers someone has, the more they pay us. So we have customers literally paying us thousands a month, and pretty much anyone that's paying us 3 figures a month is worth a chat, right? Or not even, and worth is not the right word, but it's like justifiable, right? The revenue is going to pay back the employee time or whatever. So we've ramped up the medium touch quite a bit, and it has worked out well.
In the WordPress world, in the WordPress community, a lot of us all flock together, right? We're all we're either service companies, and we're going to WordCamps, and there's other service companies there who we're sometimes competing with the same customer. We're doing competing plugins, but there's not this feeling of competition. It feels like we're all there to help each other, but at the same time going for the same customer. In your world, I just want to know what it was like to sort of, look at the MailChimps and the ConvertKits of the world and the Constant Contacts and being like, God, how do I compete against this? Like, how do you keep your blinders on from those scenarios, but at the same time try to do this podcast and be open about growth and be as transparent to get the entrepreneurs hyped up about your product? Like, what was that like, and how did you manage all of it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I kind of have mixed feelings about transparency in general. I've actually become less transparent over the past 10 years. I've never been the one to like say, here's my revenue and all my stuff to the penny, but I have shared a lot of tactics, the things that I've learned to help other folks get started. And it wasn't until the past maybe 3 years where I started feeling kind of burned by that, where some of the stuff that I had shared in the past, people would borrow, and I would say, you can totally do this. Like, go take what I've done and use it in your space. It wasn't until the past few years that stuff I had shared was borrowed and basically used against me directly to compete with me, and really pissed me off, because it just feels like a little bit of a betrayal there, And so I have definitely pulled back on the specifics of a lot of my tactics and the things that are actually working. I just don't feel comfortable sharing as much. The stuff, I just knew when we were starting Drip, like MailChimp and Constant Contact were not going to watch. They weren't going to pay attention to what I was doing and somehow try to steal that. They knew that they should build automation, and we were hearing the same thing, and we were just able to do it faster because we were smaller. With ConvertKit, they weren't around. We were there first, so we launched first, and we got automation first and all that stuff. So that wasn't a concern either at that point. But I think overall, I think transparency is cool when it's point in time. Like, I will often at a conference specifically, I will say, look, I'd appreciate if you didn't tweet this, if you didn't put these numbers out, but here's my talk, and I'll tell the story, and then I will give a revenue graph. That's the only time I tend to release revenue, and it's at that point in time you can see the history. Then I step away. By the time that video hits the internet and everybody knows, it's 6 to 12 months later, it's almost irrelevant. So I'm a fan of that when it's to prove a point or to specifically tell a story or to specifically drive something home of like, this is what this did and this was the outcome, and the actual number is important. The ongoing transparency of just, let's have all of our revenue out there. There are people who do it genuinely. I find most of it to feel pretty markety to me. Like, hey, let's just share. Like, Pat Flynn and Buffer, they put their stuff out there. It's for marketing purposes. Like, if you think any other reason, then you're kind of deluded, right? I also find I do find some people do it very genuinely, like Rand Fishkin from SEO Moz. Everything I read from that guy, awesome. Like, his transparency is the kind of transparency I wish everyone had, where he actually talks about the negatives and actually is fairly he has enough like self knowledge or whatever to realize that he can tell the truth, and it's not always sugar-coated. I mean, that's the problem I have. A lot of transparency feels braggy and very sugar-coaty, and like, I'm always transparent about my wins, but it's
right.
Sitting there saying like, boy, this totally sucked, and then just leaving it and not ending the story with an upsing. And then I figured it out,
Right.
It's like, so anyway, that's my,
and here's an affiliate link.
Yes, exactly. So I have a whole long rant on this that is probably not worth it. I've recorded, I interviewed Josh Pigford from Barometrics on Startups with the Rest of Us probably 30, 40 episodes ago. And we went into this for a pretty extensive period of time because he is transparent and publishes all their revenue. And he said, early on, it was a great marketing thing and it got him locked in, but it brought a ton of competition into his space. And they've struggled to grow. I mean, they've essentially plateaued, and I think part of that is because of the competition that he brought there. So there's always things to learn. There certainly are transparency. I think the transparencies in general have been helpful to our industry because we've learned more. But I do think that there's kind of different motivations for it, and you got to be aware of that, as you watch it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up those points because that's. I just feel like, again, in the context of the WordPress world, I think things are changing, and I think we're going to see, again, this is just speaking strictly the WordPress world. I think we're going to start to see less of this transparency, like not even just the traditional transparency reports, but sort of companies helping other companies. I know it sounds dirty, and it might not be the best way to phrase it, but I really think that grabbing the customer and owning the customer's experience is really going to start to tighten up, because the businesses have to in order to survive. And I've seen a lot of people doing transparency reports, and I haven't seen them do one in like 6 to 8 months. Well, what happened, right? What happened? And it also affects their values, right? Because if they want to sell if they're doing really well, let's say they're making tens of thousands of dollars a month in a WordPress plugin, and they want to scoop up some investment or get bought out, it's probably not good to have those numbers out there anyway, right?
That's exactly right. Yep. It totally is. Yep, I agree. There's several negatives to being that open. What I've tended to have found is what you said, where a lot of people will be transparent early on because it doesn't matter when you're making $500 a month, nobody cares. But you hit 30, 50, 100 grand a month, you're paying people's mortgages, and someone's using, your mortgage and everybody else's, these employees are relying on you, and your competition is using what's in your transparency report directly steal your customers, or steal your features, or combat whatever it is. Suddenly it's like, wait a minute, why is what I'm putting out there actually doing more good than harm? And you kind of have to ask yourself that question. So I have seen a lot of companies get to that point, or even entrepreneurs get to that point and really back off on the reports.
Yeah, well, especially in WordPress, since you could literally scoop up somebody's GPL code and say, "Hey, nice job. Here's a coffee," and you're off.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So, again, shifting gears, let's get back to the reasons behind, or reasons you care to share for selling Drip to lead pages. Do you get to a point where you're like, I think we could do better by getting acquired by somebody else? Or is it like you've realized, and don't take this the wrong way, but you've realized like, man, this is all I can do by myself, right? Like I need to, in order to get to the next level, I just need to bring it to another brand or bring it to another company. Mm-hmm. What was the thought process like to do that?
Yeah, there were a few things going on. One was that, a business like Drip is very resource intensive, both in terms of humans and in terms of server resources and costs. And so it wasn't a wildly, I've had most of my businesses in the past have been more profitable dollar per dollar than Drip was. One of the reasons was that, it is an intense business, but also it was growing. Growth tends not to be profitable because you have to hire new people, you have to ramp up servers. You hit 15, 20 Amazon EC2 servers running 24/7, and you start to see a pretty big bill there. And so we realized, boy, the lack of finances, since we're self-funded and trying to grow off revenue, the lack of money in the bank for the first time ever in my entrepreneurial career was actually hampering our growth. It was, I'd had all these businesses in the past. I never thought to myself, if I had $250,000 in the bank, I could grow faster. It was never an issue. With Drip, it was an issue every day because I wanted to hire 2 more engineers. I wanted to hire another customer success person. I wanted to double the number of servers we had. There was all this stuff that I could do with money. And so Derek, my co-founder, and I really mulled this over and said, should we raise a small round? We know enough people with, who would invest in us. We could kind of do this fund strapping model where we're not going to raise venture capital, but we're going to raise some funds and get to basically use it just for growth, to continue to get larger and eventually basically pay the investors back, or maybe there'll be an exit. We mulled that over. During this time, we were being approached over and over by people wanting to acquire us, companies wanting to acquire us. So we were propositioned many times, and Lead Pages was one of several suitors who were interested in an acquisition. And so we started thinking through, interesting, what if we didn't raise funding? Because raising funding means, even if I'm going to do it from friends, who we know in the space, you're really going to you're in it for another 3 to 5 years because you got to grow more, right? And so we started thinking, well, how long are we going to run this? Are we going to run this? I'm going to be 42 here pretty soon. Like, am I going to run this till I'm 50 or 60? Like, what's the plan here? And, selling is something you want to do while you're growing, right? It's paradoxically, you really want to sell when you don't need to sell. And so with the hockey stick going up and to the right, we just batted it back and forth as like, if we are acquired, we can take money off the table. For me, it was if I can take enough money away, there's this great quote from Jason Cohen when he sold a Smart Bear, but he basically says, someone sits across the table from you and they offer you enough money that you never have to work again. It changes your whole perspective, because it's suddenly like, whoa, okay. So I can pay for my kids' college, and I know that I'm going to be working because I love it, right? I run conferences and have a podcast, and I'm going to write another book and all this stuff. But it's a really interesting moment to decide of like, well, do I want to raise this round of funding and, keep it going? Do I want to maybe take some money off the table and kind of have some security and stability for myself and my family, but then also be able to continue growing it with essentially the resources of a funded company? Because Lead Pages has raised, I think it's public, but it's like 37, it's public information, around $37 million. They have enormous resources. So maybe the best of both worlds, maybe, this was the question we're asking ourselves, is to actually get acquired by them and continue to grow this thing. And, I'm sure, I don't know if you noticed, but within the first 24 hours, we doubled the number of servers we had because we had budget. This is after the acquisition. We put 3 job openings that I couldn't afford before, right? So we're hiring 3 engineers. And I hired 3 people in the last year. We're hiring 3 people in basically the first 45 days, We doubled our affiliate commission to 30%, which again, I couldn't do because I needed the money to grow, on and on and on. Like there's a bunch of stuff we were able to do. And so that was the rationale, was like, we can actually take Drip further, faster. And there's also, a little bit of taking some money off the table, because long-term, you don't know what's going to happen long-term, right? Is there going to be another recession here soon, right? I mean, we all have to worry about a lot of stuff, right? There could be some things that, rock the world. So, anyways, there's obviously a longer thought process to it, in terms of, I've been doing this for 15 years. Early 40s is not that old, but it is old, like it's starting to get to the point where like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this when I'm 50 at the pace that I'm doing it at right now, and so where between now and then, where does that end? Like, I genuinely don't think I have another SaaS app in me to start from scratch. I may acquire stuff. I'm doing angel investing. I love it. I love advising. I want to continue to be knowledgeable and in this space, but for me to start another one from scratch, I actually don't think I'm going to do it. So it just starts, a lot of factors come into play.
So that's an amazing thing for somebody to hear. Maybe the amazing's not the word, but I don't think I'm going to start another SaaS app, or I don't feel like I have another SaaS app in me. People don't realize, like from afar, again, like when just talking about transparency and things like that, people see it on Twitter and they're like, oh, Rob's got Drip, and every night he goes home like Scrooge, like the Uncle Scrooge, and he jumps in his pool of coins, right? And he swims in his pool of coins because he's got Drip. He's doing all kinds of revenue per month. That's awesome. That's where I want to be. When I get to where Rob is, I'm not going to feel as constrained or as stressed out as I am in my small little business trying to make paycheck to paycheck. Incorrect, right? Incorrect, because the stresses are multiplied, and then there are new stresses that come in to when you're running a business like Drip, like you said, payroll, people's mortgages, healthcare, salaries, growing the servers out, wanting to hire new people. It almost feels like you're back in your agency or consulting days where you've got this pipeline, and once the pipeline dries out, you have to go and sell more customers, right, and trade more time for dollars. It's almost the same types of stresses, just in different ways, I guess, in terms of the business goes.
Yeah, I think growth does that as well. Like I've had businesses where they were more, I'll just say flat or stable, and they were much more profitable, right? Because you're not trying to invest all this stuff in. I mean, trying to think, HitTail's net profit margin was probably 80%. It was very profitable, but it was just me with a few contractors. It's a totally different business, and that's where I realized, that was actually more relaxing. I was more relaxed 4 years ago, where I didn't think, where did I make a wrong turn? But you could think that, like, why am I more stressed out right now than I have been in years? Even though you have, like you said, I finally achieved this success that I've been dreaming of for 10 years, which is to have this SaaS app doing 7 figures. This is going to be great, and it was. It had its ups and downs. I don't want to make it out like it was terrible. It was it's been an awesome, and I shouldn't say it was, because I still work. Like I moved to Minneapolis. I'm working on Drip still. The whole team is working on Drip still. So we're still there. Like not much has changed aside from we have more resources, but that definitely came into play, at a certain point of like, this is maybe not all I thought it was going to be. And your mileage may vary. You may have an app that's less, intense and may have more profit. And if you don't grow as fast, you'll have more profit and stuff. So there are nuances. I don't want to say, getting a larger business with 10 people can never be fun, because certainly there's been a lot of fun stuff to it. But comparing that to being acquired and having even more resources and also having some money in the bank at a different level is really an interesting decision to have to make.
I mean, there's so many shiny objects that folks can, aspiring entrepreneurs can watch online. They can watch somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk and say, that guy literally just managed Facebook pages for brands, and now look at him, right? Moving into this ridiculous office in New York with a team or a company of maybe 1,000 people at this point. I don't know. They can watch your story and say, well, look, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to start a SaaS business, and I want to get acquired by a bigger company. I can do that kind of thing. Or they could watch small sort of artisanal product makers sell ebooks and sip margaritas on a beach. There's all these different things that people can watch online, and for good or for better, or for better or for worse, they can follow one or the other, and it's not always what it seems to be on the outside. I can't even imagine getting on a plane every 2 hours like Gary Vaynerchuk and flying around everywhere. I'd never be able to do it. So you're going to be at the company now, and you're going to continue to lead the development of Drip?
Indeed. Yep. I'm the VP of product for Drip. So we're like a business unit inside Lead Pages. And as I said, my whole team is coming with us, and everybody had the choice of whether they wanted to move or not, or the employees did anyways. And some are moving and some are staying at our remote offices. But yeah, it's been fun. We're like about 5 weeks in, 5 or 6 weeks in. It's been cool. Yeah. We moved to Minneapolis, my wife and I, about 3 weeks ago. But we were, the closing was about 5 weeks ago, and so we were essentially working for them as of July 1.
Nice. I'm going to jump into some listener questions that folks sent me.
Awesome.
All super excited to have you on the show.
Oh, cool.
First one comes from Travis. Rob, how grateful are you that Infusionsoft is such a steaming pile of poop?
That's funny. I mean, I can't. I don't like to disparage competition. I think the fact that marketing automation tools were, and most of them are, really expensive, and they're like enterprisey, and that they have trouble keeping bugs out and shipping new features and that kind of stuff, it really did leave a nice gap in the market. Basically, the way originally I envisioned it, as we started moving into automation, was you had MailChimp and Aweber and maybe Constant Contact and Campaign Monitor, and those kind of sit along the bottom next to each other, right? And those are $10, $20 a month and up. And then you jumped way up if you wanted like automation and any type of visual builder and that kind of stuff. You jumped up to $200 or $300 a month. So there was nobody in between. Who's the $20 to $200 solution? And that became us. And although we started at $49, a lot of people, were on our $99 plan. It made it easy because we basically had to build a good product, which is what we're pretty good at because we're developers. And then we were able to really hit that mid-market. It's the same thing, in the accounting space where QuickBooks, everybody hates it, and so Xero is able to come in, and there's really a nice big space there. Any market you can find where people hate a tool or really despise it, but they just have to use it because it's the only tool, I think there's opportunity there for entrepreneurs to build something a little better.
Yeah. This one comes from Daniel. How do you grow a new product without, 1, crashing your existing business, or 2, ending up in divorce? And this is probably a loaded question for sure, and a long answer, but I think you've kind of hinted at it before. There probably is no real balance, but I'd say you'd have to let one go over the other, right? And especially if you have a service business and you're trying to launch a product business, one's got to give.
It's a really hard balance early on. I think that there's a couple things. One, you have to get your spouse on board. Like they need to be on board. You can't be fighting about this constantly, and you can't be trying to work around your life. It has to be part of it. And part of getting your spouse on board is probably giving them some type of idea of how long it's going to take, and you don't know for sure, but you can at least say, hey, look at the revenue we made this month. It was only $300, but I think it might be $600 next month. And when it hits $5,000, I can go part-time with consulting. There's if you can collectively agree on goals, I think that's a really, really big thing. So my wife and I on Zen Founder, there's an episode probably in the 30s or the 40s, and the entire episode is this topic of how to get, it's onboarding your spouse, I think is what we called it. And it's totally, we examine this entire subject. And I would recommend, if you're trying to do that, to start there. And then, it's hard, to be honest. I mean, this answer sucks, but it's a bunch of hard work and hustle in the beginning. That's what it was for me. I worked a full-time job just like everybody else, and I worked nights and weekends, and sometimes I stayed up till 2 a.m, and the next day at work sucked. And just slowly over time, you get one win. And it took me years. I started launching products in 2000. I had essentially, for all intents, zero product revenue until 2005. So it took me 5 years. There weren't podcasts like ours, and there weren't people teaching it, and there was no microconf. So it took me longer, but it's a lot of hustle early on.
Rob's new book, How to Get Your Spouse into a Funnel.
That's right.
How to convert your spouse. This one comes from Zach, and I think you kind of answered this along the way here. So I'd like his perspective on WordPress from his side of the business and startup community. I think you've hinted at that before, but any other words of wisdom for how you perceive the WordPress business world?
Oh, I think there's a lot of opportunity in WordPress, because I think that the marketing chops. So as an example, one-time software sales, 10 years ago, downloads, it was easier to get into because a lot of marketers hadn't gotten in there yet, right? It was still the core developers, and as developers, we just aren't that great at marketing. You have to learn it. And then SaaS was like that for a while, where you could just write a decent SaaS app, and you needed to market it some, but the marketers didn't come until, let's say, 2008, 2009, when it became the big gold rush. I think WordPress is still in that early phase, where if you can build a good plugin and you can learn just enough, you don't need to be the best marketer in the world. You just need to be better than your competition. And in the WordPress space right now, there aren't that many really good marketers yet. I think they will get there. I think there's a ton of potential there. Just the space is getting bigger, and there's going to be some innovative. I think folks are trying to figure out how to make subscriptions work. I think that's going to happen eventually. So I think there's a lot of promise in it. And the nice part is it's pretty easy to get started. Not easy, but it's easier to get started in it than the SaaS space, because of the built-in distribution you guys have. Yep.
This one comes from Jonathan. He's been building companies his whole life. I got to imagine or assume that he's going to start another one soon. ?
Yeah, I'm going to be I'm going to be working on Drip with lead pages until I don't know. It's I keep saying until I'm done. I don't know what that will be. But yeah, I definitely have time here with the team, and it's not something I'm looking to just skate on in the first X months or whatever. I'm planning to stick around for the time being until I feel like everything's good. I'm always going to be doing something. I mean, I've been writing and podcasting and blogging and running conferences for forever. I do want to get back to more code. I mentioned that earlier. I haven't written production code in a few years, and I would love to get back into hacking away at some PHP. Love to learn Ruby. As I said earlier, I don't think I am going to ever start another SaaS app from scratch where I am the co-founder. It's just so much work. And I had thought this before the acquisition. We were in the midst of doing Drip, and I'm thinking, what? I can't do this again, So I guess that's it. I will continue to be doing stuff. I can't stop working. But I think my work will just look a little different. I guess it'll look more similar. It might even look more similar to what I was doing in 2008, 2009, 2010. That's when we launched MicroConf, launched the podcast, wrote the book, had the blog. That was a fun time that I look back on pretty fondly.
Nice. And MicroConf just wrapped up, right? Or at least MicroConf Europe.
That's correct. Yeah, we were in Barcelona just a week or two ago.
My buddy Jordan Gall finally got him up there. I know he was super excited for that.
Indeed. Yeah, that went really well. His talk was he actually opened the conference, and it was a really good talk. Just the story of cart hooks so far.
Stelly FD too. I see. Actually, I didn't even know he was going there. That's awesome.
Yep. Yeah, he's spoken at the Vegas one a couple times, and so we had him out there to talk about you're kind of getting your first sales demos going, and how to just learn some basics, because he's so far ahead of all of us in that respect. But he's able to speak to the level of kind of as a software person, how to get that working.
Nice. Put him right after lunch, right? Get everybody motivated again.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. And he's got people. I put him first on the second day so that they'll go for people. Yep.
Yes.
He's so awesome. He starts and he has some energy, and you're like, man, he really has charisma. And then as he goes on, 20 minutes in, he's just like yelling. He's just yelling at the audience, but in this really positive, awesome way where you're so pumped up. You're like, I want to go make a cold call, man. It's cool. And I hate cold calls. So
Right. That's awesome. Rob, this has been an amazing episode. Where can folks find you to say thanks?
Yeah, they can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Rob Walling.
Nice. Any sweet features coming that we should know about for Drip?
There's stuff in the works, but I can't tell you. It's too top secret. Yeah.
Nice.
In the interest of anti-transparency.
Yeah. Maybe some kind of sweet pop-up customizer.
Is that what you want?
No. No, I'm loving the product. No, I do love the product. Firm believer in it, and it helps my business. And once I sat down and actually got the automation, all my content written out, I was good to go. So
awesome. Good to hear it.
All right, Rob. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining everybody else. mattreport.com/subscribe. It's the #1 way to stay connected. And plugintut.com if you're looking for WordPress tutorials. Got the new YouTube channel over there. Hey, everybody. Thanks for sticking around and listening to the episode. I wanted to tell you about something new that I'm working on. It's called the Blog Challenge. You can get it over at mattreport.com/blog challenge, and that's for the early signups for this new sort of boot camp style course for blogging. And the #1 reason why we fail at blogging is because we are doing this all on our own. There's no accountability. There's no one to really share the ideas with. So what I'm coming up with is a 30-day sort of challenge where I get 4 people together in a room. We meet every week. A virtual room, that is. And we meet every week, and we talk about the challenges of our blogs. We share some content ideas. We really help each other out, not just on the content creation, but maybe the technical stuff too. What's the best social sharing plugins? What's the best newsletter email pop-up plugin that you're using, and what's the easiest to use? And speaking of email automation that we talked about today, what's the best way to get that up and running on your website? It's all about accountability and about learning how to kickstart this blog of ours. The fall's coming. We're going to put away these hot, humid summer days and really focus in on writing for the end of the year and setting those goals. It's a perfect time to start writing again. If the blog challenge sounds interesting to you, it's mattreport.com/blog challenge. Don't tell anybody about it. It's really only being promoted at the end of these podcasts. We want to keep it a little bit of a secret. Remember, only accepting 4 people for this new challenge. Check it out, mattreport.com/blog challenge. Thanks, everybody.